Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thanks very much. So, the thing about writing a book about Handel's Messiah, especially this time of the year, is that you come to expect that your walk-up music is going to be the Hallelujah chorus, and I did not expect how deflating it would be when that doesn't happen. So I'll carry on. So I wrote a book called Every Valley, which makes a terrific holiday present, if I may say so. And it's about the backstory to Handel's Messiah. This piece of music that, especially this time of year, is absolutely everywhere. Carnegie Hall is doing its 150th consecutive annual concert of this piece of music, if you can believe it. It was first performed in 1742, and it's the only piece of music in the classical repertoire that has never been revived. Never. It's been in continuous performance. Since then, Bach was revived. He went out of fashion, and then he was revived at some point. But Handel's Messiah has always kind of been with us. It's become kind of the sonic pumpkin spice latte of the season, you know? I mean, the Hallelujah chorus, for unto us a child is born, you know, it's the shepherds. And it's the whole kind of story that is just kind of there in the background. And I didn't realize, though, how I needed to hear this music in kind of a new way. My wife Maggie and I live in Washington, D.C. We live on Capitol Hill. And over the last several years, as for many of you, these have been some of the toughest years of our lives, as they've kind of been for everybody. There was COVID, and we had friends who had health issues and family issues. We had a serious health issue in our family. And then in the middle of that, there was January 6th, which was 6 blocks from our house. So in the middle of that history, I decided that we were kind of in need of something different. And some time ago, I had purchased for Maggie for Valentine's Day an old Victrola. So it's one of those wind-up kinds, and ours is called a VV50 from 1925, and it's a portable, which means that it weighs about 40 pounds, and is cast iron in this tiger oak case, and you wind the thing up, you know, and let it go. And of course, then you're experiencing completely acoustic sound reproduction. There's not a piece of electronics in it. And I thought, if I could find the oldest recording of Handel's Messiah, which we both have loved over the years, the oldest recording I could find and put it on this Victrola, that would somehow be big and bold magic. And so I did what you would do, which is to, go to eBay, and I found the oldest recording, 1927, Sir Thomas Beecham conducting the BBC Chorus and Orchestra in Westminster Hall, 1927. I purchased it from the seller in London, and it arrived in this whole box full of onyx shards. These things are made of shellac, they're not made of vinyl from that period. And he had just thrown everything in. It was clearly his maiden aunt's estate sale, where he had gotten all of this stuff, put it in a box, and then shipped it off to us. But miraculously, Messiah was intact. It was in its own buckram case, which is what it would have come in, completely intact. And I put this thing on, and for those of you who know this piece of music well, it begins with this lilting kind of overture in a minor key, and then shifts to a major key. So you have this sense of expectation and something building. And then this tenor voice comes in over the violins. In fact, the violins sort of stop, and a tenor voice sings out. And at that point, Maggie and I both burst into tears. We just burst into tears. And I thought, something special is going on here with this piece of music. It seems suddenly new and fresh and unfamiliar. So I started this journey to try to tell the story of where that emotion came from. You know, go to a performance this season. Please try to go to a performance anywhere you can, whether it's Lincoln Center or Carnegie Hall or Trinity Church, Wall Street here in New York, or your local choir. Go to a sing-along where people sing from their seats. And look around, and there will be somebody with tears in their eyes. There will be somebody weeping at this music for whatever private reason this piece of music speaks to them. And so Maggie and I both started this journey. I was researching the book, and we were traveling up and down the length of the United Kingdom to Venice, which has a connection to the story, to the eastern shore of Maryland, which turns out to have a connection to the story, strangely enough. In all of these places, looking at archives and letters and sites that had some connection to the creation of this piece of music by George Friedrich Handel. The person I was led to most spectacularly, the real center of the story in some ways, was a completely obscure figure named Charles Jennens. There's no reason you should ever have heard of him, but he's essential to the creation of this thing that is now one of the great treasures of world civilization. Because even though the music is written by George Friedrich Handel, one of the greatest composers of the period we now call the Baroque, Charles Jennens was the person whose idea it was, who assembled the text for it, unbeknownst to Handel, and then shipped it off to Handel, his friend, or even better, his frenemy. They did not get along very well, to set to music. Charles Jennens turns out to be kind of the Ira to George Gershwin, if you like, or the Bernie Taupin to Elton John. And those comparisons are not weird. They actually really fit this pair, the librettist, as we would call Charles Jennens, and the composer, which we would call Handel. Jennens was from one of the wealthiest families in Britain. He was born in 1700. He owned a massive estate in the English Midlands. His family had made its fortune in the iron trade right at the beginning of what we would call the Industrial Revolution. But he also suffered from a very particular illness that in the 18th century was called the hip, H-Y-P. The hip was short for hypochondria, but hypochondria did not mean a kind of imaginary illness or oversensitivity, although he wrote a lot in his letters about intestinal gas, I will tell you. But hypochondria in the 18th century meant what we would now call chronic depression, or maybe even bipolar disorder. And if you read his letters, and more than 100 have survived, you can tell when he's in a kind of manic phase and when he's in a super dark, low phase. He was a pretty good musician himself, although not a professional. He could read music and play things competently on the harpsichord or the piano, but much of his life was spent battling this sense of encasing doom and despair. His brother Robert had died by suicide, and so this may have been a family trait that he himself was spending much of his life trying to deal with, including by dousing it with a fair amount of what one of his friends called your old friend Burgundy. So at some point, when Jennens was around 40, so around 1740 or so, Charles Jennens repaired to his library and art collection, which turned out to be one of the greatest art collections in the country. He collected music manuscripts. He was Handel's greatest fan, his kind of super fan, and collected all of Handel's manuscripts. The oldest copy of Vivaldi's Four Seasons that we have was in Jennens's library. He repaired to this kind of sanctuary that he had built in Gopsall Hall in Leicestershire, his estate, and started pulling down from the shelves the King James Version of the Bible. He was a devout, high Anglican Christian. Books on theology, books on philosophy, laid them out on his library table and used long wooden sticks, we know, to kind of keep the pages open. And in this manic moment, started copying down Bible verses from the Hebrew prophets, from the Psalms, from the epistles in the New Testament, copying them down on sheets of paper. And you can imagine him then moving them around on this massive library table until they kind of made sense to him. Because for those of you who know the Messiah, It's, of course, completely composed of sacred texts, but nothing is in the biblical order. It's in the order that Jennens wanted you to hear. The things that made sense to him. How would he make his own theological, philosophical journey through his own faith, or to us in a more secular age, a journey toward the possibility of hope? How could you build your own ladder out of the abyss that Jennens found himself in? That was his contribution. He shipped those pages off to Handel. Handel, in 24 days, turned them into music and premiered that on the 13th of April, 1742, in Dublin. And that's the thing that we now know as Handel's Messiah, but we should really call Jennens's and Handel's Messiah. Because there's a secret that Jennens tells you right at the beginning. Because the first words that he wrote down, placed at the top of the Messiah, are the words, "Comfort ye. Comfort ye my people. Speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem, and cry unto her that her warfare is accomplished. Her iniquity is pardoned." That's the first recitative that we've heard in every concert, every performance of this piece of music since 1742. The other secret is that that particular text from the book of Isaiah is not saying, "You people be comforted." It's a command from the prophet Isaiah. You do the comforting. You be the one to comfort my people. And I think what a tribute to this depressed, ill individual who, along with Handel, created one of the greatest works of music ever created, perhaps the greatest piece of participatory art ever created. That the biggest, boldest, bravest thing he ever did in his life was to comfort you and me. Thank you.